Hello, welcome back. It's good to be here. I thought we would start off with a little bit of an astrology update just to let you know what all the planets are doing and all of that stuff. So we have an Aquarius new moon on the 29th, which is Wednesday. And in case you didn't know, the new moon is always the same as the sun sign that we are in. So we're in Aquarius season. That means we have an Aquarius new moon. And then the full moon is always in the opposite sign. So the opposite sign of Aquarius, or the sister sign, is Leo. So our full moon will be in Leo. But the new moon, being in Aquarius, is all about like envisioning the future, breaking down like old, outdated structures and boundaries, which we're getting into today, and just being your weird self. The Aquarius is like the innovator, the rebel, the unique person, the one who is the most technologically advanced, things like that. Also, Uranus will be going direct in the sign of Taurus on the 30th. So this is going to be wrapping up for us some major shifts around like personal finances and the ways that society uses natural resources and different societal values too. But these are different changes that we've had going on since 2018. So, long story short here, be authentic. So, last week, we talked about how standards are influenced a lot by our past. What we see in the home we grow up in, what we learn from making friends in school, and what we begin to establish in our own beliefs as we grow and learn through our relationships. Building healthy standards for yourself can help with creating healthy boundaries as well. So, boundaries are the guidelines you give to others to show them how you will accept being treated in your relationship. Our boundaries don't only consist of things like not answering your phone after you've clocked out or saying no to last-minute invites. We also need to have healthy physical and emotional boundaries as well. So, I had a couple of stories that I wanted to share about myself that will give you examples of those. So I can recall a time when I was a kid, my parents used to go to this local mechanic for anything that they needed for their vehicle maintenance. He was this old family friend, relatives had been going to him for years. Every time we would go and see him, my parents would say, "Jen, go give Don a hug." And every single time, little me did not want to. He was just, I don't know, little me picked up on vibes that I didn't like with him or something. But I was chastised for not doing so, respect your elders, go give him a hug, things like that. So I felt forced to hug him when I didn't want to, which led me to, as an adult, to letting people get away with touching me in ways that I was not comfortable with, simply because they were quote unquote friendly. And then for emotional boundaries, this is one that I've kind of recently discovered deeper layers to. I've been working on my communication skills as I begin to have some real honest, healthy relationships in my life. Sometimes I find it hard to talk about my feelings. There are times I get so frustrated with myself because the things I want to say are mean and hurtful, and I know I don't mean those things to that person, but the little me inside is hurt. So, as an adult, I have had to figure out how to productively express those feelings. And I find myself, when faced with that, what feels like conflict, whether it is or not, I cry. And that frustrates me more. It was recently that I discovered that it's because when I was a kid, if I had big feelings and began to act out because I was not taught the techniques to process them properly, my parents would ask me, "What's wrong?" And as I would become more flustered and trying to explain it, they would tell me to hurry up or suck it up or it's not that serious. They would basically just completely dismiss my feelings. And I would cry, and then they would shame me for crying and say, "Well, what are you crying for?" And so I began to learn that it was safer for me to just not share any of those feelings, to stuff it all down and process my feelings later by myself in the safety of my room. I never gave myself permission to do that in my relationships before, so now that I have established healthier relationships with people who actually want me to be authentic and crave my genuine spirit, now I can be honest with them, have that space and safety and support that I need, and the patience to stand with me as I learn through experiencing it, not just internalizing or analyzing it. I think one of the hardest things that we face is that sometimes we believe that boundaries are something that needs to be put in place from the start of a relationship. But the same as with standards, they will fluctuate and grow with us. You can establish or even end a boundary at any time you want to, anytime it's no longer serving the relationship. I think a lot of times we're concerned about the mental weight having all of these boundaries will be. We don't need even more things on our minds, right? But the thing is, when you start establishing these healthy boundaries in your relationships and enforcing them consistently, it's going to show you how much you have been disrespected, and those relationships are harder than they need to be. And it will also show you which relationships to pour more of your energy into because you are loved and supported there for who you are and all of the changes you're making for yourself. So yes, it can be mentally exhausting at times, but typically it's only in the relationships where the other person is not willing to respect your boundaries. So let's dive a little deeper. Boundaries are a way of defining the space where we operate and tolerate. They're very personal to us and reflect our current values, our priorities, and our capacities. We have emotional, mental, and physical boundaries, as I discussed earlier, that we build for ourselves. They are the lines that we draw to help us protect our energy, time, and our focus by clarifying where we end and the world begins. They help us to navigate in the present with intention and respect, which allows us to create balance and encourage growth within ourselves and our relationships. Boundaries are the limits that we set to protect our well-being and define how we allow others to treat us. They act as guidelines that communicate our needs, our values, and our expectations clearly, and what's acceptable and unacceptable in our interactions. When our boundaries align with our standards, they create this beautiful framework for a healthy and fulfilling relationship. Boundaries are dynamic and adaptable, just like we are as humans. We will likely have different boundaries for different people, whereas our standards tend to carry across all of our relationships. Boundaries allow for mutual respect, balance, and authenticity, giving us the opportunity for mutual independence, healthy expectations, and clear standards. It opens our line of meaningful communication and equality in navigating challenges. Healthy boundaries are not about having control over the other person or the relationship itself. It's about having self-awareness, intentional consideration, and respect for the relationship and the other person. We are not in control of other people or our situations entirely when they involve other people. We are in control of how we feel, act, and react within these experiences. Boundaries are meant to encourage mutual growth and respect, not have power or judgment over the other person. So let's get into some of the different boundaries. So, physical boundaries are about personal space, autonomy, privacy, and physical contact. Using my example from earlier, these boundaries are about things like who you hug or how people are allowed to touch you. We are not obligated to hug anyone we don't feel comfortable touching. Emotional boundaries involve protecting your emotional energy and your feelings. This is where a lot of us lack boundaries. We become people pleasers, putting others' feelings above our own. Creating healthy emotional boundaries allows us to determine how much emotional labor we are willing to give, for example, listening to a friend vent. These boundaries also help us to build a healthy response to criticism and how we process criticism, and how we respond to others' emotions and feelings without allowing how they are feeling to shift how we are feeling. So it's all about observing, not absorbing. We're not absorbing or taking on the other person's burdens or emotional energy. We are allowing them the space and capacity to feel how they need to feel while we maintain our own energy. Mental boundaries are based around our thoughts, ideas, opinions, and beliefs. Creating healthy mental boundaries allows us to express ourselves respectfully with openness to receive differing opinions and perspectives. Our time and energy are our most valuable sources of currency. So it's important to have healthy time and energy boundaries. By creating healthy boundaries around our time and energy, we learn to say no to commitments that overextend us or that we don't want to do. No is always a complete sentence. And lastly, generosity is not something that we should seek reciprocation or appreciation for, but creating healthy boundaries around how we share or lend our possessions and finances to others can help build better trust and clarity in our relationships. Boundaries help to protect our mental, emotional, and physical health. They help us prevent burnout, reduce stress, and help us to navigate our relationship in ways that align with the other person or the people in our lives. Having clear boundaries shows others how we will allow them to treat us and encourages respect for our needs and individuality, while also reminding ourselves of our own worth and importance. When you each respect and honor the other's boundaries, you create a trusting, understanding, and supportive relationship. The essential emotional need for most humans is to be seen, heard, and understood. So having healthy boundaries removes uncertainty and misunderstandings by defining what you will and will not accept in the relationship. This encourages clear and open communication and the ability to face conflict with more grace and poise. By learning to communicate directly and demand respect for yourself, you create a safe space for self-reflection without judgment and for self-awareness of your areas of growth and obstacles. This empowers you to recognize what needs you can provide for yourself, how your values shape you, and where your limits lie. The more we get to know and respect ourselves with confidence, the more we inspire the people in our lives to do the same. We lead by example. Becoming an inspiration in your relationships creates deeper, more meaningful, healthier connections where you both feel safe and respected to grow together. Remembering that people, even with good intentions, will take from you what you are willing to give allows you to see where you have weak boundaries and where you are more likely to be used and taken advantage of. This is not to victim blame at all, but to give the courage and willpower to you to respect yourself enough to not let others walk all over you. So, one of the best things I've noticed for myself with creating healthy boundaries within my relationships is that my nervous system is starting to become regulated. I was always this skittish little thing that would be scared by the drop of a hat. But the more I trust myself and show myself that trust by enforcing my boundaries, the more I become unshakable in the face of challenges and obstacles. I have lived most of my life with an active sympathetic nervous system. Stress, anxiety, fear of not being able to trust the future, it all made it hard for me to see any good around me. It made it hard for me to see the good in myself and to see myself as worthy at all. My self-esteem was basically non-existent, so why would I establish boundaries? Why would it matter to that shell of a woman to be respected or thought highly of in her relationships? Once I started finding my worth again, I began to see that it wasn't fair to me or to the people I was close to for me to lack all boundaries and be steamrolled over. Being of service to other people does not mean being a doormat to them. And as I started setting more healthy boundaries and really making sure they were being respected, quite a few of my relationships changed or ended. But they all made space for the ones meant to be watered and all of the newer ones that I have begun. Standing up for ourselves can feel really scary at first. Things like abandonment, conflict, and consistency can be stirred up. But we have to respect ourselves enough to give other people the chance to love us the way that we need to be loved so that we can do the same for them in return and have the best experiences in our relationships that we can. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. Let me know if you're finding these episodes helpful. I'm not real big on keeping up on social media at the moment, but you can find me on Instagram. I'll go ahead and leave the link in the description of this episode, or you can leave a comment wherever you're listening from. Let's have a conversation about this. I'll see you next time.